Have you ever experienced that peculiar sensation where the more profound your thoughts become, the greater your sense of isolation? Or noticed that with increasing understanding, fewer people seem willing to genuinely listen? This isn't merely a subjective feeling. Throughout history, society has consistently harbored an apprehension towards deep thinkers, not because their ideas are inherently flawed, but because they often unveil truths others are unwilling to confront. History serves as a stark testament to this phenomenon. From figures like Socrates and Nietzsche to Galileo and Tesla, brilliant minds have frequently been subjected to ridicule, suppression, or outright dismissal. Their intelligence wasn't the issue, rather, it was their capacity to make those around them profoundly uncomfortable. Arthur Schopenhauer, recognized as one of history's most uncompromisingly honest philosophers, posited that intelligence itself was a kind of malediction, a burden that isolates individuals who perceive the world with too much clarity. But why does this dynamic persist? Why does society inherently resist those who dare to think differently? The explanation, it turns out, is deeply embedded within the intricacies of human psychology. Consider this scenario: when you stand beside an individual possessing remarkable physical strength, you don't typically feel weak. More often, you find yourself admiring their power. Similarly, encountering a wealthy person might evoke a twinge of envy, but it rarely feels like a personal affront. However, a distinctly different phenomenon unfolds when you come across someone who is intellectually superior. Psychologists refer to this as the mirror effect. A deep thinker doesn't simply present novel ideas, their very presence subtly reflects the cognitive limitations of those in their vicinity. And for this, people are rarely forgiving. The sheer existence of an individual engaged in profound thought can engender feelings of inadequacy in others, even if the deep thinker utters not a single word. But what accounts for this peculiar reaction? Why does intellectual prowess, more so than any other form of superiority, elicit such pronounced discomfort? To truly grasp this, we must examine how our minds inherently process various forms of perceived eminence. When confronted with someone physically stronger, we might instinctively view them as a potential leader or protector. A wealthier individual may inspire admiration for their achievements, or perhaps even an aspiration to emulate their success. Qualities such as physical strength, material wealth, or conventional beauty are largely external. We acknowledge them, but they don't fundamentally threaten our core self-perception. Intelligence, however, operates on an entirely different plane. Unlike brute force or accumulated assets, intelligence is profoundly intertwined with our very identity. We construct our sense of self through our thoughts, our deeply held beliefs, and our unique understanding of the world. Therefore, when we encounter someone who operates on a significantly deeper intellectual level, an individual who questions the very assumptions we take for granted, it can feel akin to a direct assault on our fundamental sense of self. Instead of celebrating such intellect, many individuals subconsciously recoil from it. This resistance isn't born from the deep thinker's arrogance or dismissiveness, but rather because their mere existence compels others to squarely face their own cognitive boundaries. This profound challenge to personal identity is precisely why, across the annals of history, deep thinkers have so often been relegated to the periphery of society. Their insights transcend mere intellectual debate, they directly confront and threaten deeply entrenched egos. And human beings, by their very nature, are predisposed to undertake almost any measure to shield their ego from discomfort. Pause for a moment and consider your own lived experiences. Have you ever attempted to broach a truly profound or complex idea within the context of a casual conversation, only to be met with uncomprehending stares or a palpable, awkward silence? Perhaps you've observed how swiftly people steer conversations away when discussions venture beyond superficial small talk. This isn't merely happenstance, it's a fundamental defense mechanism at play. When individuals encounter a deep thinker, their minds often instinctively activate a mode of self-preservation. Instead of fostering curiosity, they default to resistance. Rather than engaging thoughtfully, they opt for dismissal. This inherent psychological response explains why intellectuals, philosophers, and visionaries so frequently find themselves isolated, not by choice, but because society, through its collective behavior, effectively pushes them to the margins. Intriguingly, numerous studies indicate that in social environments, confidence is frequently prized above sheer intelligence. People are innately attracted to individuals who exude certainty and conviction, even when their underlying ideas are superficial or lacking in depth. This phenomenon elucidates why charismatic yet simplistic thinkers often garner more widespread influence than profound thinkers who articulate their insights with nuance and complexity. History abounds with illustrations. Populist leaders, motivational speakers, and contemporary viral influencers all thrive by echoing what people want to hear, rather than prompting them to engage in rigorous critical thought. Conversely, those who bravely challenge widely accepted beliefs and conventional wisdom often struggle immensely to cultivate a broad audience. This represents the profound paradox of intelligence. The more assiduously an individual pursues truth and deeper understanding, the more acutely disconnected they tend to become from the mainstream majority. The mirror effect, therefore, doesn't merely expose society's inherent limitations, it vividly illuminates the fundamental reasons why society so steadfastly resists change in the first place. However, a crucial question persists: if intelligence can indeed be so threatening, does scientific evidence substantiate the claim that people genuinely fear it? Modern neuroscience offers compelling affirmation. Research indicates that when individuals perceive themselves as intellectually inferior, their brain's amygdala, the region primarily responsible for processing fear and detecting threats, exhibits heightened activity. In essence, profound thinking isn't merely intimidating. It actively precipitates a primal survival response, uncannily similar to the sensation experienced when confronting imminent danger. But why would intelligence activate the very same fear circuits as a tangible physical threat? The answer resides in the ancient evolutionary trajectory of human brains. For the vast majority of human history, survival was not predicated on individual intellectual brilliance, but rather on acceptance and integration within a group. Our ancestors flourished within tribal structures where social cohesion equated to safety and protection. Ostracization from the group could, quite literally, spell death, as isolation rendered individuals gravely vulnerable. Consequently, human brains evolved to prioritize social acceptance above purely intellectual pursuits. Thus, when a highly intelligent person enters a social setting, they inadvertently disrupt this delicate, tribal balance. Their mere presence subtly challenges established ideas, entrenched social norms, and existing group dynamics. This, in turn, activates the brain's innate defense mechanisms, as if facing a potential adversary rather than simply a more profound thinker. This fundamental hardwiring explains why so many deep thinkers experience isolation, not due to a deficit in social skills, but because their very intelligence causes them to conspicuously stand out in a world that overwhelmingly prioritizes conformity over individuality. A 2021 study conducted at Stanford University brought to light an even more startling discovery: the perceived threat posed by deep thinkers is profoundly context-dependent. When individuals engage with an intellectual in a one-on-one setting, they report feeling significantly less threatened. However, in larger group environments, this threat response dramatically escalates. The rationale is compelling: in group dynamics, social status acquires heightened significance. People aren't merely reacting to intelligence in isolation, they are reacting to how others perceive them in comparison to the intellectual. If an individual feels overshadowed or outshined by a deep thinker, they will instinctively endeavor to undermine or exclude that person as a means of safeguarding their own social standing. This phenomenon neatly clarifies why deep thinkers often cultivate more authentic and profound conversations in private, intimate settings, yet frequently struggle to engage meaningfully within expansive social gatherings. Psychologists have further elucidated this resistance by identifying several pervasive cognitive biases that contribute to intelligence being met with such skepticism and discomfort. The Dunning-Kruger effect *. This bias describes how individuals with limited competence in a particular area tend to significantly overestimate their own ability, while highly intelligent people often underestimate theirs. This creates an inherent friction. Those who possess scant knowledge frequently harbor an inflated sense of expertise, leading them to readily dismiss insights from genuinely deeper thinkers. Status quo bias *. The human brain, in its quest for cognitive ease, naturally gravitates towards familiar ideas and established truths, shying away from novelty and complexity. Since intelligence frequently introduces disruptive and challenging perspectives, it invariably makes people feel disquieted. The backfire effect *. When individuals are confronted with information that directly contradicts their deeply held beliefs, they rarely alter their perspectives. Instead, this phenomenon often causes them to vehemently double down on their existing views. Deep thinkers, by their nature, frequently encounter this entrenched reaction when they introduce genuinely challenging or paradigm-shifting ideas. In our contemporary digital age, the pervasive influence of social media has regrettably amplified this societal rejection of intelligence. Algorithms, designed to maximize user engagement, inherently prioritize content that is controversial, emotionally charged, or instantly gratifying over thoughtful, well-reasoned arguments. Observe the most virally successful content. Simple, catchy, and often misleading sound bites consistently outperform nuanced, profound discussions. The more intellectual an individual's ideas, the more arduous it becomes for them to distill these complex insights into the bite-sized, viral-friendly formats that dominate online platforms. Consequently, society appears to be increasingly favoring immediate entertainment over genuine enlightenment, rendering it progressively more arduous for deep thinkers to achieve widespread recognition and acceptance. So, what are the profound implications of this pervasive dynamic for deep thinkers? The rejection of intelligence isn't merely a social phenomenon, it is a complex interplay of biological imperatives, psychological biases, and cultural conditioning. It is inextricably woven into the fabric of human nature, relentlessly reinforced by group dynamics, and significantly magnified by the tools of modern technology. This, however, is not to suggest that deep thinkers should cease sharing their invaluable insights. Rather, it underscores the critical necessity for them to comprehend the formidable forces arrayed against their endeavors. If society so consistently resists intelligence, then what, precisely, does it truly embrace? The unequivocal answer lies in comfort, a pervasive preference for predictability and ease over challenging, unvarnished truth. Arthur Schopenhauer, whom we previously identified as one of history's most unsparingly honest philosophers, famously contended that intelligence is not merely a gift, but rather a profound curse. In stark contrast to many of his contemporaries who perceived intellect as the ultimate pathway to worldly success, Schopenhauer asserted that the more intelligent an individual, the greater their inherent struggle to forge genuine connections with society. But what, precisely, renders intelligence such an onerous burden? Schopenhauer's philosophical framework was constructed around a central concept he termed the will, an inherently blind, irrational, and ceaseless force he believed drove all human behavior. According to his analysis, the vast majority of people navigate their lives predominantly governed by the will to live, meaning their primary motivations are the relentless pursuit of pleasure, comfort, and survival above all else. Highly intelligent individuals, however, operate from a fundamentally different paradigm. Instead of uncritically succumbing to base instincts, they cultivate a will to truth, an insatiable and often relentless desire to comprehend reality in its rawest form, even if that understanding leads to profound discomfort. While the regular person instinctively seeks solace in pleasure and actively shies away from challenging truths, deep thinkers are compelled to pursue truth, even when it promises pain and isolation. This creates an unbridgeable, fundamental disconnect between intellectuals and the broader societal fabric. Where most individuals derive their meaning from social relationships, transient entertainment, and routine diversions, deep thinkers often experience a profound disillusionment with these pursuits, perceiving them as mere superficial distractions from more pressing, existential inquiries. This profound disconnect manifests in several critical ways for the deep thinker. They discern lies and deception *. The majority of social interactions are predicated upon superficial small talk, subtle status maneuvering, and polite, often necessary, forms of dishonesty. Deep thinkers, who inherently prioritize unvarnished truth over outward appearances, frequently find it challenging to authentically participate in this social charade. They crave intellectual depth, while society prefers simplicity. Most individuals are content with surface-level conversations and readily digestible information. Deep thinkers, however, possess an insatiable hunger for meaningful discussions, profound insights, and nuanced complexities. This disparity makes engaging in everyday interactions arduous, often leaving them feeling bored, disengaged, or profoundly misunderstood. They recognize the inherent futility of many human desires. Schopenhauer himself viewed desire and ambition as ultimately illusory. While most people are relentlessly driven by the pursuit of wealth, power, and conventional relationships, deep thinkers often question the fundamental purpose and lasting value of these very endeavors. This perspective can cause them to appear distant, aloof, or even indifferent to the passions that animate the majority. Ultimately, these factors coalesce to explain why intelligent individuals so frequently feel misunderstood, alienated, or even actively resented. Their mere presence, and the clarity of their perceptions, compels others to confront uncomfortable truths about themselves and their world, a confrontation that, for most people, is intensely undesirable and assiduously avoided. Schopenhauer poignantly likened intelligence to an acutely heightened sense of awareness, a characteristic that, while ostensibly a blessing, often feels more akin to a debilitating curse. He famously penned, "A high degree of intellect tends to make a man unsocial." His rationale was elegantly straightforward: the more one truly comprehends the complexities of existence, the less one is capable of deliberately ignoring its harsh realities. The more acutely attuned one becomes to the world's myriad flaws and inherent suffering, the more arduous it becomes to discover genuine happiness within it. Ultimately, the deeper your thoughts delve, the more profound your sense of solitude grows. For Schopenhauer, happiness and intelligence were, in fact, inversely correlated. He genuinely believed that ignorance, rather than wisdom, held the genuine key to human contentment. This sobering perspective clarifies why so many profound thinkers throughout history, luminaries such as Nietzsche, Pascal, and Kafka, have frequently grappled with profound depression, existential crises, and debilitating social isolation. Schopenhauer, however, did not merely diagnose the inherent challenges, he also thoughtfully proposed potential remedies. He posited that while intelligence might indeed pave the way for loneliness, deep thinkers possess avenues to effectively navigate and cope with their isolation. Embrace solitude. Schopenhauer regarded solitude not as a punitive condition, but as an invaluable privilege. He advocated that profound thinkers leverage their time alone for enriching intellectual and creative pursuits, rather than anxiously seeking validation from the broader society. Cultivate like-minded connections. Instead of striving to conform to mainstream societal expectations, Schopenhauer counseled intelligent individuals to actively seek out those who share their intellectual inclinations, whether through engaging with philosophical texts, participating in online communities, or joining exclusive intellectual circles. Engage with the world astutely. He cautioned against indiscriminately sharing profound insights with an audience unprepared to receive them. Instead, he advised thinkers to diligently observe societal patterns, comprehend its intricacies, and meticulously select their words. Schopenhauer's timeless teachings continue to serve as a practical guide for contemporary deep thinkers grappling with social rejection. While intelligence can undeniably usher in a degree of loneliness, it simultaneously bestows upon individuals unparalleled freedom, profound wisdom, and an exquisitely deeper comprehension of life's tapestry. Ultimately, Schopenhauer viewed intelligence as a potent, double-edged sword, a source of immense power and insight, yet also a conduit for pain. While it illuminates reality with unparalleled clarity, it inevitably distances one from the majority who, by nature, prefer the comforting embrace of illusions. Ultimately, Schopenhauer's profound philosophy substantiates what many of us intuitively suspect: society does not, in fact, fear intelligence itself. What it truly fears is what intelligence unfailingly reveals. Deep thinkers are not cast aside because their ideas are erroneous, they are rejected precisely because they are right, often too soon for the collective consciousness to comfortably accept. So, if you have ever found yourself feeling profoundly alone within the vast expanse of your thoughts, understand this fundamental truth: you are not flawed or broken. You are simply perceiving the world for its unvarnished reality. But does this insight condemn deep thinkers to an inescapable fate of isolation? Or are there viable strategies to navigate societal currents while steadfastly preserving one's intellectual depth? The truth is stark: society is not inherently structured to embrace deep thinkers, rather, it is fundamentally designed to uphold stability and maintain the status quo. The vast majority of people consistently prioritize comfort over truth, which fundamentally explains why superficial conversations, simplistic ideas, and repetitive content so pervasively dominate social spaces. But why is comfort so consistently prioritized over intellectual depth? Why does society so steadfastly resist change, even when that change demonstrably leads to progress and betterment? The answer is intricately woven into the very fabric of human psychology and profoundly shaped by the institutions that mold our thinking from the earliest stages of life. At its most fundamental level, the human brain yearns for certainty and predictability. Evolution has meticulously programmed us to instinctively recoil from mental discomfort, a pervasive phenomenon psychologists term cognitive ease: Cognitive ease *. The brain exhibits a marked preference for information that is simple, familiar, and easily digestible because it demands minimal mental energy to process. Conversely, when an idea is complex, highly nuanced, or entirely unfamiliar, the brain perceives it as cognitively demanding and potentially even hazardous. System justification theory *. This theory elegantly explains why individuals are inclined to defend the societal status quo, even when it objectively operates against their own best interests. Rather than critically scrutinizing authority or challenging outdated beliefs, the majority of people opt to rationalize them, simply because the prospect of change feels too profoundly uncertain. Groupthink *. Humans are inherently social creatures, and people would rather conform to widely accepted beliefs and norms than hazard social ostracism by challenging them. This powerful drive for conformity is precisely why the majority tends to vehemently reject intellectual dissent, even when such dissent is rigorously founded upon truth. Now, cast your gaze upon today's omnipresent digital world. Who commands the most attention and influence on social media platforms? Rarely are they profound intellectuals. Instead, the spotlight invariably falls on those adept at condensing intricate ideas into easily consumable, viral, feel-good sound bites. Genuinely thought-provoking discussions often struggle to gain any significant traction, primarily because intellectual depth necessitates time and contemplation, whereas viral content is characterized by its immediacy, emotional resonance, and effortless digestibility. Algorithms are meticulously designed to reward engagement, and nothing captures public attention quite like controversy, outrage, or humor, all elements that frequently marginalize and sideline rational, intellectual discourse. This digital environment also fosters the proliferation of echo chambers, where individuals are primarily exposed to information that merely reinforces their pre-existing beliefs, rendering them highly resistant to any new or challenging perspectives. Within this increasingly polarized landscape, deep thinkers who dare to challenge the mainstream narrative frequently find themselves not only ignored or profoundly misunderstood, but also actively targeted and attacked. This systemic rejection of deep thinking extends far beyond the digital realm. It is meticulously cultivated and reinforced within the very institutions that fundamentally shape our minds. The education system *. While schools ostensibly claim to cultivate intelligence, in practice, they often reward rote obedience and conformity over genuine independent thought. Students who excel at memorizing and regurgitating prescribed information are often lauded, whereas those who dare to question, challenge, or critically examine authority figures are frequently stigmatized as troublemakers. Workplaces *. The corporate world, for all its rhetoric about innovation, does not primarily favor the most intellectually brilliant or truly innovative employees. Instead, it consistently elevates those who seamlessly fit the culture and diligently uphold the existing power structures. Politics *. In the political arena, leaders who articulate bold, often unpopular, statements rooted in rigorous logic and objective truth frequently lose out to those who simply master the art of telling people precisely what they wish to hear. This insidious pattern fundamentally clarifies why so many of history's most profoundly celebrated intellectuals were, paradoxically, outcasts or marginalized figures during their own lifetimes. Their ideas were consistently perceived as disruptive and threatening, rather than genuinely valuable. Society, it seems, claims to cherish intelligence, innovation, and critical thinking, but in an unsettling reality, it only truly celebrates these qualities once they have become safe, widely accepted, no longer challenging, and comfortably assimilated. To further underscore this point, consider these poignant historical examples. Galileo Galilei was condemned and imprisoned for his revolutionary astronomical discoveries, yet today he is universally lauded as a scientific genius. Vincent van Gogh, a towering figure in art history, lived and died in abject poverty, largely unrecognized. Now, his paintings command millions at auction. Nikola Tesla, whose visionary ideas could have profoundly revolutionized energy and technology, lived and died in relative obscurity, his genius largely unappreciated during his lifetime. These narratives powerfully illustrate a consistent truth: society does not readily embrace intelligence when it fundamentally challenges established norms. It only truly celebrates such brilliance in hindsight, once its disruptive potential has faded and its insights are no longer perceived as threatening. So, if you are a deep thinker who struggles with acceptance, what course of action can you pursue? If you have ever felt profoundly misunderstood for the depth of your thoughts, take solace in this: you are in distinguished company. Throughout the annals of history, many of the most brilliant minds were not celebrated, but instead subjected to ridicule, persecution, or willful ignorance during their lifetimes. Their groundbreaking ideas were often deemed dangerous, profoundly disruptive, or simply too complex for the prevailing societal mindset to assimilate at the time. These trailblazing thinkers shared a singular characteristic: they were unequivocally ahead of their time, and for that very prescience, they often endured immense suffering for their wisdom. Socrates, often revered as the progenitor of Western philosophy, dedicated his entire life to incisively questioning commonly held beliefs. He relentlessly challenged his fellow Athenians to engage in critical thinking, to meticulously scrutinize their own assumptions, and to consciously embrace reasoned logic over unquestioning adherence to blind tradition. Yet, instead of being honored and celebrated for his profound wisdom, he was infamously brought to trial on charges of corrupting the youth and disrespecting the gods. His actual crime, however, was far more fundamental: he dared to empower people to think for themselves. Despite being offered a pathway to escape, Socrates stoically chose to drink poison rather than compromise his cherished principles. His immortal words, uttered just before his death, resonate powerfully: the unexamined life is not worth living. His ultimate sacrifice delivered an unequivocal and chilling message: society harbors a deep-seated fear of those who courageously challenge its most fundamental tenets and core beliefs. Galileo Galilei's sole crime was the audacious discovery of verifiable truth. When he irrefutably demonstrated that the Earth orbits the Sun, he irrevocably shattered centuries of deeply entrenched religious dogma. The formidable Church, which meticulously maintained its power through its unchallenged control over knowledge, swiftly branded him a heretic. Under the ominous threat of torture, Galileo was compelled to publicly recant his own groundbreaking discoveries. Though we now universally acknowledge him as one of history's most preeminent scientists, during his lifetime he languished under house arrest, his seminal work systematically banned for nearly a century. Galileo's tragic narrative stands as irrefutable proof that even the most undeniable truths will be vehemently rejected if they pose a significant threat to the prevailing power structure. Friedrich Nietzsche's philosophical works were widely deemed too radical, too profoundly unsettling for his era. He boldly contended that traditional morality was fundamentally flawed, that society was largely constructed upon comforting illusions, and that authentic strength emerged from individuals forging their own values rather than passively accepting preordained ones. At the time, these revolutionary ideas were simply too challenging for most people to intellectually process or emotionally accept. Consequently, he was dismissed as mad, his profound works either deliberately ignored or grossly misunderstood. Yet, in our present day, Nietzsche's philosophy exerts an undeniable influence across fields such as psychology, literature, and existentialism. His groundbreaking ideas on power, the will, and morality now deeply shape the contours of modern philosophy. His legacy stands as compelling evidence that society frequently rejects deep thinkers in their present, only to grudgingly embrace and celebrate them in the future. Nikola Tesla was, by every measure, an unparalleled visionary. He envisioned a future of free energy for the entire world, wireless electricity, and a multitude of technological advancements that held the potential to utterly revolutionize human civilization. However, society, and more pointedly, those who wielded significant power, perceived his groundbreaking ideas not as progress, but as a direct threat to their vested interests. Industrial magnates like Thomas Edison and J. P. Morgan stood to amass immense fortunes from the commercial sale of electricity. Consequently, Tesla's audacious concept of free energy was systematically suppressed and ultimately abandoned. Despite his undeniable genius, Tesla died alone in a modest hotel room, largely forgotten and impoverished, while others unjustly built vast fortunes by exploiting his stolen or unimplemented ideas. His life serves as a profoundly tragic, yet perfect, illustration of how society often rewards shrewd businessmen and adept marketers, tragically overlooking and even sabotaging genuine scientific visionaries. Alan Turing's pioneering work in cryptography proved instrumental in accelerating the end of World War II. His extraordinary code-breaking skills are credited with saving millions of lives. Furthermore, his foundational theories in computing laid the very groundwork for modern artificial intelligence. Yet, instead of receiving the profound honor and recognition he so richly deserved, Turing was cruelly persecuted for his personal life. In 1952, he was subjected to chemical castration for being gay, a devastating official decision that tragically led to his suicide at the tragically young age of 41. Today, Turing is rightly celebrated as an unequivocal hero and a monumental intellect. But in his own era, society callously discarded him, despite his utterly indispensable contributions to humanity. While the overwhelming majority of historically acknowledged deep thinkers have been men, Hypatia of Alexandria stands as a singular and rare exception. A brilliant philosopher, mathematician, and astronomer, she audaciously challenged the male-dominated intellectual landscape of ancient Rome. Hypatia championed scientific reasoning and rational thought, a stance that inevitably placed her in direct opposition to the powerful religious authorities of her time. In the year 415 AD, a fanatical mob of religious extremists brutally murdered her, perceiving her intellectual prowess and independent spirit as an existential threat to their established power. Her tragic story serves as a chilling illustration of a recurring pattern throughout history. Profound intellectual progress is all too frequently met not just with resistance, but with violent, often deadly, opposition. Each of these monumental thinkers, despite their diverse fields and eras, ultimately shared a strikingly similar fate. They introduced ideas that were simply too advanced, too revolutionary for their respective times. While alive, they were met with rejection, ridicule, or outright punishment. Yet, with the passage of time, their very ideas became the indispensable bedrock upon which human progress was subsequently built. This cycle reiterates a core truth: society does not genuinely fear intelligence itself, rather, it fears what intelligence inherently represents: profound, often unsettling, change. This naturally leads us to a pivotal question. If history so consistently demonstrates society's resistance to deep thinkers, what course of action can you, if you are one of them, possibly undertake? Does this imply that deep thinkers are irrevocably condemned to perpetual loneliness? Absolutely not. It simply underscores the crucial necessity of comprehending how to navigate society judiciously. Not every environment or every individual is prepared or receptive to truly profound conversations. Therefore, it is wise to reserve your most intricate and profound thoughts for those rare individuals who genuinely appreciate and can engage with them. You don't require millions of people to grasp your unique perspective, you merely need the right ones. To thrive, it is paramount to actively cultivate connections with kindred spirits. Seek out those who genuinely think like you, whether through the profound wisdom encapsulated in books, engaging with vibrant online communities, or participating in exclusive intellectual circles. Furthermore, observe that the greatest thinkers throughout history also discovered effective methods for rendering their most profound ideas accessible. As Albert Einstein famously advised, if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. Strive to master the art of communicating your intellectual depth without inadvertently overwhelming others. Arthur Schopenhauer, with his characteristic acuity, once remarked, "Talent hits a target no one else can hit, genius hits a target no one else can see." Deep thinkers fundamentally perceive the world through a distinct lens, and this unique perspective will invariably cause discomfort for some. However, this inherent friction should never compel you to cease thinking deeply. Society, despite its occasional apprehension, fundamentally needs deep thinkers. It simply doesn't always possess the insight or the mechanisms to fully embrace them. Therefore, if you have ever felt like an outsider because of your thoughts, remember this powerful truth: you are unequivocally not alone. And while society may, at times, recoil from profound intellect, it is precisely deep thinkers who courageously propel humanity forward. If this message resonated with you, please share your reflections in the comments below. Have you ever encountered rejection specifically because of your deep thinking? Let's foster a meaningful conversation. And if you wish to further explore the profound insights from history's greatest minds, be sure to subscribe to this channel.